So it's really great to have a group here that are doing, I think, incredibly exciting work. And you get the idea, that sort of nexus between service learning and sustainability. Um, I don't even need Bridie to tell me what that is. That's her class down on the banks of the Stillwater, a class with a lot of students. I don't know which one that is, but there's 300 students who are kind of wrestling with what it means to go out into the world and think about these issues, and you're going to hear a lot more from a panel, really. So you have Claire Sullivan and Dan Dixon working with other faculty and students to kind of make this happen. Sandra DeUrioste-Stone and Bridie McGreavy and Cindy Isenhour, and Sharon Klein is out, I think, in Pittsburgh right now at a conference, but she's part of this too. And so I think it's a great opportunity to learn. In the Mitchell Center, we do pieces of this, but there's so many exciting things going on around campus, around Maine, and around the world that I think the more we can get synergy there, the more we'll be able to accomplish. So thanks, and I'll hand it over to you guys.
Thanks, David. You did a really good job introducing everyone. I don't think I need to bother now. So we're going to kind of run this presentation tag team style. And I drew the short straw, so I get to go first. This is too loud. Okay.
I just wouldn't get too close.
Yeah, stand back a bit. So UMaine is part of the Campuses for Environmental Stewardship project aimed at integrating service learning pedagogy into environmental stewardship courses, encouraging students to work with community partners on issues of pressing environmental concern. So that's sort of like the guiding light behind what we're doing at the moment. So our panelists today, actually before I jump into that, I'm going to give you a brief overview of how the presentation is going to be organised. I'm going to tell you who we are, what we're up to, also what is the Maine Campus Compact, a little more detail on that, how we're integrating service learning into our coursework and collaborating, what our lessons learned so far are, and how do we advance service learning as a model for sustainability. That will be sort of the first question that we focus on for our panel after the presentation. So who are we and what are we up to? So our panelists today are Claire Sullivan, the Associate Dean for Community Engagement in the College of Liberal Arts and Science. Sandra DeUrioste-Stone, she's an Assistant Professor in the School of Forest Resources. Bridie McGreavy, I'm sure you all know, she's an Assistant Professor of Environmental Communication in the Department of Communication and Journalism. She's also a Faculty Associate with the Mitchell Center for Sustainability Solutions. We've got Cindy Isenhour, an Assistant Professor of Anthropology, also cooperating faculty at the Climate Change Institute and a Faculty Associate at the Mitchell Center. And myself, I'm Dan Dixon, I'm the UMaine Director of the Office of Sustainability. I'm also a Research Assistant Professor at the Climate Change Institute. So some participants who are not present today are Sharon Klein, she's an Assistant Professor in the School of Economics, and Jolene Blay, who's an Associate Professor in the New Media Department. So you can see that overall the mix of expertise here is truly interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary. So two of the CES service learning efforts that are taking place this semester, I'll tell you about the first of those. It's CMJ 107, which is Environmental Communication, and CMJ 493, which is Environmental Communication. Both of these are taught by Bridie. That's the first effort. The second effort is Eco 370, which is Building Sustainable Energy Communities Through Service Learning, which is taught by Sharon. So because Sharon can't be here, I'm going to tell you just a little brief overview of what her course is doing. Sharon's course explores community energy as a possible solution to a complex set of technical, economic, environmental, and social issues associated with energy supply, distribution, and use. Her community partners are Rockland Window Dressers and the Bangor Unitarian Universalist Church. So because she can't be with us, I have to put in a plug for her talk, which is taking place here on November 30th at 3 p.m. So she'll be talking about, do you know the title of her talk? Community Solar. So that should be a good one. Don't miss it. So then, so what is community engagement. So the Carnegie definition is community engagement describes collaboration between institutions of higher education and their larger communities, local, regional, state, national, and global, for the mutually beneficial exchange of knowledge and resources in a context of partnership and reciprocity. So that's a pretty serious definition right there. So to bring that back to how does that relate to UMaine and UMaine's real mission, I go back to the Moral Act of 1862, which is actually officially titled An Act Donating Public Lands to the Several States and Territories which may provide colleges for the benefit of agriculture and the mechanic arts. So agriculture and the mechanic arts, I suppose, at the time were kind of considered slightly lower class pursuits, but we needed more people to do them. So the Moral Act provided each state with 30,000 acres of federal land, and then the land was sold by the states and the proceeds were used to fund public colleges that focused on agriculture and the mechanic arts. So sort of link between that, our initial reason for being, and then our current strategic plan, which is we aspire to be the most distinctively student-centered and community-engaged of the American research universities, you can definitely sort of understand the link there. So we're aspiring to be the most community-engaged American research university. That's pretty serious. I think it's going to require serious effort. So I found a quote that actually kind of struck me as a really nice link between these two mission statements. It's from Dennis Holtschneider. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. He's the president of DePaul University. And it goes like this. The majority of service learners say that they value their community-based service learning courses for the opportunity that they provide to apply theoretical learning to practical situations. However, these students often approach their community experiences with trepidation, if not downright fear. But fear of what? Most often, it's fear of what they think they know about inner city neighborhoods and the people who live in them. This fear comes from media images that convey highly negative images of people of color, urban dwellers, immigrants, and people living in poverty. Engaging in community partnerships enables higher education to provide more than theoretical opportunities to encounter people who confront very different life challenges than many of our students. So in other words, it starts students off along the road to becoming truly engaged citizens. And with that, I'll pass it on.
Hey, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Maine Campus Compact. Wrong way. What is the Maine Campus Compact? So this is a coalition of 18 colleges and universities in Maine where the presidents have signed this compact saying that they are committed to community engaged efforts to promote service learning on campus. And it's part of, there's 34 state and regional campus compacts in the country, and we have a national organization in Boston. So a lot of people don't know that this is going on, but what they do provide is professional training for faculty members to get them initiated into what service learning is and why it's important. So I just think that it's important to know because Maine Campus Compact was the one who put the grant together for the campuses for environmental stewardship, along with, so there was 4, so Massachusetts, Vermont, and New Hampshire, and Maine got together and came up with this idea to try to integrate service learning courses into environmental stewardship classes. So there were we needed 4 faculty members. They had to be interdisciplinary across the campus, and they had to integrate in a meaningful way service learning. So we were able to do that, and we worked on that and got 4 faculty members. Now we got a 5th one involved. And the idea is to really help promote this activity through training. So Maine Campus Compact is providing 2-day training for faculty development. They have site visits. They're planning the field seminar that will be at all the 4 different states will have their own field seminar. And then they're going to have a best practices showcase in September. So we're trying to get to, okay, what are the best practices within this kind of model? So that's what we're going to be asking you at the end to try to think about, would this work in different types of complex problems? So this one was chosen for environmental stewardship. So we were awarded that sub-grant. This really came at a great time for UMaine because we had just received the reclassification for the Carnegie Community Engaged Campus in January 2015. So we are considered to be a community engaged campus, but we still have a long way to go in kind of institutionalizing this commitment. We also started a service learning designator program last year where we would have faculty members decide that they want that course to be designated as a service learning class so students can find these classes if they're really interested in that hands-on learning opportunity and really working in a genuine way with community partners. They would be able to find those classes. So that's an ongoing initiative to try to build up the amount of courses that we have. Because we're doing this type of work, we just haven't designated or students aren't able to find these classes in an easy way. The definition, we actually have a service learning definition. We have to go through Faculty Senate to get this approved, but this is our definition of service learning at the University of Maine. So there it is, a teaching and learning strategy that integrates meaningful community service with instruction and reflection to enrich the learning experience, teach civic responsibility, and strengthen communities. And the two key pieces for that for me are the meaningful community service. In higher ed, we emphasize the community need comes first. In K through 12 service learning, they often have the students, the voice of the students be most important, and then finding a community partner to meet that need. So this is working with meaningful, reciprocal, mutually beneficial partnerships with the community, and then also integrating reflection. So the service isn't just an add-on, the service is an integral part of the course. It's part of the course content. So that's why this definition is a good one, I think, for UMaine. There's certainly challenges, and you will be hearing from the faculty, so I'll let them talk about the challenges, but there are many. I've taught service learning classes myself, both online and in the classroom, and the challenges are a lot to do with you have to be flexible, change things on a dime if you have to, working with community partners on a semester schedule, when they do not operate that way, are some of the challenges. But there are also benefits as well. And there is some research that is pointing to the benefits of service learning from the student point of view, from the institution, from the community partners' point of view. And for the students, it gives them an opportunity for this kind of transformative learning experience. And there is some indication that it helps with retention and graduation rates, some academic outcomes too. Definitely a sense of belonging if they really feel that it works. So it has to be done right. And you'll learn too from the faculty today how that would be a way to make sure that you're practicing those best practices. So this is just a little bit of an overview, but this will be more of the kinds of the questions. This is what our aim is toward a sustainable model. We're going to be assessing the impact of this, trying to develop best practices, understanding whether or not this is transformative for students, and how do you maintain those strong reciprocal partnerships over time, so these aren't just one-offs, but they can be contained over time, really getting at what environmental stewardship is, that complex problem, and how can we help meet some of those solutions and really gain solutions. The interesting part about this is we have multiple academic levels. We have graduate students involved, undergraduates, we have small classes, and we have a class of 220 students involved as well. So can this happen in that situation where we're learning from each other to sustain those projects? We need more support and training overall, and I just want to put in a little bit of give you a tiny bit of information about the Engaged Black Bear, and I'll end it there. This is an initiative to integrate digital badging into really co-curricular work. So for this particular, there are 19 digital badges that we're piloting right now for this year, and one of them is the Environmental Stewardship badge. So students who are involved in these classes, if they also become an active member of an Environmental Stewardship club on campus, and they are and they attend 3 sustainable or environmental stewardship seminars or events on campus, they would earn this badge. And I won't go into much detail about what the whole vision of the Engaged Blackbird is, because that's not the nature of what we're talking about, but it's to form these learning pathways. So that was just be one step to kind of give students a little taste if they're interested in environmental stewardship, then to get them actively involved and move them forward. Okay, so, right?
Yes, so how are we integrating service learning into our coursework? I'm fortunate to be able to present first, although I'm not teaching the class at this semester. So the class that I'm going to be teaching is Sustainable Tourism Planning. It's a new course that we're going to be offering in the spring of next year. The objectives of the class are to help students better understand and analyze sustainable tourism planning models. So there's a range of models that you can utilize. So we want students to learn, or I want students to learn, the variety of models that exist, and also have students identify what are the trends and challenges of including sustainable tourism development and planning. And so we can talk about the stewardship. When we talk about sustainability, and I always mention it to my students, remember the 3 pillars. It's about social cultural sustainability. It's about economic sustainability, because who wants to have a business that's not going to be profitable? But we're also talking about environmental sustainability. So the 3 pillars, we start talking about those in their first year of studies here. And so talk about those trends and challenges of making those 3 pillars work and integrate themselves. Also develop critical thinking. We're talking about a senior level course, and actually next semester I'm going to offer it. I'm going to open it for graduate students as well, and it will be the first tourism course offered for graduate students. So anyone interested, we're going to have that course offered. So where students get to contrast theory, but also data generated from the field and experiences in planning. And finally, the last objective, which is the one that links most heavily with the service learning component, would be demonstrating the competence of students in professional conduct and communication skills. They're going to be developing a planning document for a community. And these are just some pictures of a similar course that I used to teach in Guatemala, where we would engage students with indigenous communities for sustainable tourism planning. The approach that I take in the classroom is to take a destination planning approach that is regional. Many times when we think about destinations, we think about just a specific location, and we don't realize that they are connected in the landscape, and you need to think about the corridors, how are you going to link other communities to make this destination successful in marketing, but also developing economic profitability in the area, and how your operation is going to impact other regions economically, socioculturally, and environmentally. So the textbook that I'm going to be using is by Claire Gone, excellent book on regional planning, and also the state of Maine, the Office of Tourism, has relied heavily on this book to think about their planning approach. So we're trying to link also our stakeholders in the state to think about this planning process. We think that through this course, there will be an opportunity to develop opportunities and to have students think about the sustainability concerns about a particular destination. So this is where I'm also thinking about not only applying the theory, but having students develop the skills in doing a plan. So when they graduate, they can go out there and do their own planning processes. So this is where I link the service learning component. I don't want them just to learn the theory, I wanted to apply it. The state is currently going through a process of trying to generate destination clusters. They were putting a proposal for a bill together, and now the government has decided to create a position for a regional recreation planner. So we're going to be supporting this big effort of the state by selecting a small community or a small destination here in Maine as our first study. So this is what I'm talking about, the Rural Destination Area Initiative. And next year they're going to start working really hard to get the person hired and prioritizing the destinations that as a state they're going to be working on. For a destination, I'm considering a place that has unique assets. Of course, in tourism, we want to make sure that we have the resources to develop the opportunities. So in this case, the place that we're thinking about has seasonal recreational and tourism activities, downhill skiing, fall tours, and also some development of summer recreational activities. Anyone may think about the place just from the pictures? Can you tell which area may be here in Maine?
Western Maine.
So it also has, for a destination to be successful, it has to have some tourism structure, as we call it. So besides the infrastructure leading to the area, we have to have lodges or restaurants. Getting closer? So yes, and finally, a welcoming environment. You as a visitor want to feel welcome when you go to a place. So welcome to Bethel. We're already talking with some of the leaders in the tourism industry to conduct our project there. I went to a meeting about 2 months ago, and the Maine Woods Consortium talking about the research and classes that I'm conducting. And 3 communities raised their hands that they wanted to be the first ones to participate in this planning process. But we've been working this past year in Bethel doing research, so it would be the perfect fit for what we're currently doing research-wise. So my goal is to embed teaching with collaboration with and outreach. So across UMaine, that's where we're interacting with other faculty members, and in my case, I feel very fortunate that I'm going to be learning from the experiences by Sharon and Bridie, and developing questionnaires and also lessons learned from this semester, and also collaborating what we call the university-private partnership, so collaborating between the university, the business stakeholders in the destination, but we're also going to be collaborating with the Maine Office of Tourism and potentially the Bureau of Parks and Lands, that they're getting involved in this process as well. And we also hope to link a research piece to our class. We're going to be doing a survey, a pre and post, and we're having reflections and a blog, and we're hoping to utilize that data to publish in our research journal. So as you see, we're trying to link the 3 different components of our mission: teaching, outreach, and research in our classes. So that's all that I have to share today, because I haven't taught my class, but I'm extremely excited about this opportunity. Bridie?
So David, this is the real test. I know you recognize Stillwater.
Oh, wow.
You recognize that too?
Recognize, yeah.
So I'll be talking a little bit about this. This is the Freedom Falls Mill site. It's one of the collaborating partners in my service learning project, which is entitled Dams, Rivers, and Environmental Communication. I'm also referring to this as service learning for the masses because I'm teaching 2 levels of environmental communication this semester, CMJ 107 and 493, and 107 has 220 students. So we're exploring in our collaboration the different models that we can use and that are available to us for engaging students in a whole variety of different classroom contexts. And I've been learning a lot in trying to do this with a large group, and finding a lot of success in it actually too, and hearing from students that it is helping to make their learning more meaningful. Service learning is an appropriate approach, one that fits really well with one of the core commitments in environmental communication. Robert Cox, who is a leader in the field, who's a professor emeritus at University of North Carolina, he describes environmental communication as a crisis discipline. So it's this ethical, normative commitment in the field, and it has two kind of core focal areas. The first is through research and practice to identify problems, complex problems, sustainability-related problems in the world, and to understand how communication shapes our understanding of these problems and failures in communication, to raise awareness about problems and what do we do about them. But really importantly, and this I think is the link to service learning, environmental communication is trying to do something about it, to recommend, he says, alternatives to enable people to respond to these signals of environmental stress in ways that are appropriate to human and biological well-being. So in a semester-long course in environmental communication, we find it's easy to get bogged down in the problems, and students start to feel overwhelmed with like, well, what do I do about this? And service learning can come in and help empower them to say, okay, you know, these problems exist here, and we can get into the community to figure out, well, what do we then do about them? So some of the problems that we're focusing on in environmental communication at both levels, you can see the whole host of really complex global issues related to toxic chemicals, environmental racism, issues related to fossil fuel dependency and climate change. And this focus on dams that we have as part of the semester-long case study really allows them to narrow their focus to say, okay, well, how can we understand these really complex global issues through dams? So when things like you have, you know, Hurricane Joaquin that made landfall, and you have aging infrastructure, students are paying attention to these things and say, oh yeah, well, we're learning about this in class, and here you have this event, and I wasn't paying attention to dams before, but you know, it's really opening my eyes to see this is happening right now, and it's giving me kind of a tangible focal point for it. And then in addition to being able to, you know, sort through some of the complexity of these really big issues, this is happening right here in our backyard. So they can connect with what's going on, not just here in Maine, but literally, like on this island. So it makes the learning more meaningful for them. We've been focusing on this Penobscot River restoration case study. This, as many of you probably know, is an ongoing effort to remove Veazey Dam, Great Works Dam, and to do fish lifts and retrofits in Milford and the Howland dams. A national model for success in these types of efforts, and one that is so close to home. It's also one that is helping us think about this new project that we just got funded through the New England Sustainability Consortium. It's the Future of Dams project that is running for the next 4 years, $6 million grant, collaboration across a whole host of institutions, core partners at University of Maine, University of New Hampshire, and University of Rhode Island, where we're trying to figure out through this integrated social ecological systems research, what do we do with dams? And the objective in the class then is to connect environmental communication perspectives with dams and decision making to inform our foundational understanding in this project, and then build capacity over time so that we can expand our service learning efforts to respond to needs within organizational partners. So it's starting with the research community largely, although I'll show a list of collaborators, and the intention is to grow it over time and have it be an integrated part of this 4-year project on the future of dams. Oops. So we have core collaborators, given that this is scaled for 220 students. Somebody, when I was brainstorming about this, said, well, you could just have them all go out and develop these community partnerships. And that becomes hard to manage. So we have a smaller set of partners, a more focused set of partners. David Hart, who all of you know, director of the Mitchell Center, co-PI on the Future of Dams project, came in, introduced the Future of Dams, and asked for student help to say, how can environmental communication help us understand decision-making about dams? Catherine Schmidt from Maine Sea Grant came in, talked about her longstanding work with the Penobscot River restoration case. I want to make a plug for her great book that just came out, The President's Salmon. Students are reading that, and it also, you know, shows, here you have somebody on campus who's just published this great book about a very local, close-to-home issue. John Banks, who's the director of the Natural Resources Department for the Penobscot Tribe, is coming into the class next week. Rory Saunders and Tara Trinkle-Lake, both from NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, are going to come in, talk about their experience with Penobscot River. And then David and I also took a field trip, and students in my 493 class will be taking a field trip to the Freedom Falls Mill. Has anybody been to the Freedom Falls Mill? Lost Kitchen? Oh, it's this really cool site in Freedom, about an hour from here, where in the Penobscot River restoration case, we've been focusing on dam removals, and here is an effort to do something different. They've built a restaurant. They are developing this alternative energy because in that case, it didn't make as much sense to remove the dam, and so they're trying to find innovative ways to build community around this historic site and preserve the historic and cultural value there. So in this project then, I have a host of materials that are drawn from the Penobscot River restoration case, and students will be working in groups to apply one of 6 environmental communication perspectives that you can see listed here, focusing on what are the metaphors we use in taking a rhetorical lens, and how are our dams visualized? What are the dominant news frames about dams? How do we communicate science and risk related to dams? How do we consider justice, river restoration as a social and environmental justice issue for tribal communities? What were the issues in the Penobscot River restoration case related to public participation and collaboration? What were the dynamics going on there? Although this case has been going on for a number of years, as far as I know, this is really the first time that we've been able to apply an environmental communication lens to the many different facets of the restoration effort. And then students will be able to choose one of 2 options. They could do a mixed media blog post or some kind of creative performance. I'm giving a plug for mini documentaries that will then become part of what we're calling a communication decision support system. And it will integrate with the New England Sustainability Consortium's first project, which is Safe Beaches and Shellfish. This is a website that Tyler Quiring produced. And the idea is that instead of producing these final projects that then get lost in their hard drives or grow dusty on the shelf, we'll archive these on this website, continue to work with community partners to let them know that they're available, and then use them for a foundation for developing a better understanding of, okay, what can we do moving forward? What would be even more meaningful to our community partners? So we see this as a starting point, and also as an innovative way of doing that service learning for the masses, providing access to that kind of information and analysis that's available through environmental communication. So what are we learning so far? We're learning a lot, and we're just a couple months into this. I wanted to highlight what we're learning from the research that Sandra mentioned. We're taking a multiple case study approach, which I think is a great opportunity to collaborate on research across our courses on campus. So as Sandra mentioned, we have surveys. We're going to be analyzing class assignments. We'll also be doing an analysis of their blogs. And we're trying to address the question, what are changes in perceptions and motivations for environmental stewardship based on their participation in this service learning project? I want to share this is literally like we just closed the survey on Wednesday, so very, very preliminary descriptive results out of what we're learning. Sharon and I sent this survey to our classes this semester. We asked them, have you ever heard of service learning prior to this class? See, about half and half had never even heard of it. So real opportunity to just raise awareness about this type of activity. How have you become involved in service learning or volunteerism? For those who had heard of it and who said that they had been involved, it was a yes or no question. We wanted to get a sense of, well, where are they coming to this? What are the opportunities for us maybe connecting in those places and just understanding it more? This one is really striking to me. Have they heard of environmental stewardship? So no, a general lack of familiarity around the concept of environmental stewardship. So a great opportunity to raise awareness about this more focused set of activities. Do they feel connected to environmental leaders on campus? Sorry for the little typo there. 18% said yes. And then the remainder, indicated that they don't feel connected. So in terms of the mission of the Mitchell Center, I think that also speaks to a great opportunity and one that we're trying to increasingly build into our classes. So now we want to close with some of our lessons learned, top 10 lessons learned. I'll give the first 5 and then Cindy's going to come up and close us out here. And we want to use that to pivot into our panel discussion. So these are more focused, the first set are more focused on what we're learning across this collaboration, the development of this model. I'm learning that service learning and field trips, I took all 220 out to the Stillwater, that it is possible. It is logistically challenging, but it is doable. That the service learning model really needs to align with scale and pay attention to scale. That it's not appropriate in my situation to think that I'm going to develop, individual level partnerships with student groups, but that having this communication decision support system seems to be at this stage appropriate for this type of scale. This summer we had a brainstorming session about what we wanted to do around our collaboration. We came up with all kinds of ideas in that really productive brainstorming mode that happens, and I think we've all learned that kind of capacity building to realize those plans, it's essential and it takes time. So giving ourselves the flexibility to allow our plans to change when they need to say yes to our other opportunities that weren't necessarily part of that original plan has really made this a very dynamic collaboration. As we were doing research around the development of the survey, we realized there's this gap in research that connects service learning and environmental stewardship. So as pre-tenure faculty members who want to do research, this is a good gap that we'll be able to fill. And then I wanted to close with insights from this conference on community writing that I just got back from in Boulder, Colorado. It struck me that we have great momentum on this campus for service learning and a lot of opportunity to do even more. I was sharing with some of the people there who are largely rhetoricians who don't do service learning. And I said we have an associate dean for community engagement. We're working on a service learning designator. We're working on this Engage Black Bear initiative. There's been a real focus at UMaine on developing these types of initiatives, and their jaws just dropping. Wow, you're doing all that, and it's either that those things aren't necessarily happening on their campuses or they're not yet tapped into it. So I came home with even more energy for this type of work based on that experience.
So my course, like Sandra's, will also be, wow, that's really loud, will also be offered next semester. It's a natural resource management and cross-cultural perspective. So I'm not going to talk about that today, but I have taught 2 previous classes that had significant service or engagement components. One was an environmental justice course, and I integrated service learning to a large extent for the same reasons that Bridie mentioned, is that students get so depressed that you have to figure out a way to help them have an outlet for that and to do something. And then another class, Introduction to Environmental Studies, that I also had. So I'm speaking in these lessons learned more from those experiences, but also from the other end of the spectrum. I used to work for an environmental nonprofit, and we every semester would bring in several classes usually that were doing engagement projects. And so I learned a lot about how to be a good instructor with a civic engagement or a community engagement project for community partners and what not to do, because it can, in some ways, if you don't do it correctly, you can end up creating more of a burden for your community partners than you would anticipate. So my main lessons are that advanced planning is extremely important. It takes a lot of time, but it is totally worth it. My class evaluations from the service learning classes, students are literally exuding great gratitude and thankfulness for having been a part of the process. Not that it's just about course evaluations, but students certainly seem to express that it was one of the more valuable experiences they've had in college. So in terms of advanced planning, I think one of the most important things that you can do is to set up these really reasonable expectations and achievable outcomes with community partners, so that when you're working with your community partners, you have a very clear sense of what they expect to get out of it, what you hope your students will get out of it, and to really formalize it almost like a memorandum of understanding so that it's really clear what everyone expects. The other thing that I learned is that it's really fun if you have a scale appropriate for more individualized projects. It wouldn't work in Bridie's case, I don't think, but maybe in Sandra's case and mine. If you can give students some latitude for how they want to do their own engagement process, it can be incredibly rewarding. In my environmental justice class, I had a student blow 4 glass orbs. She was a double major, environmental studies and fine arts, and she blew 4 glass orbs and then went to her chemistry professor and asked him to help her replicate some of the pollutants in Cancer Alley in each of the 4 orbs, and then created this video and sent it to Sierra Club, and they've used it. I mean, it's just amazing what some students will do. So define clear ground rules for interaction and make sure that we have very clear shared goals and experiences. So.
In the last 15 minutes is to open it up. We recognize that many of you here may be incorporating service learning into your classes. We want to hear from you, learn from you, and we want to have a conversation engaged around this question of how do we collectively advance service learning as a model for sustainability. So are you doing service learning in your classes? Is it directed at sustainability? If not, what's it directed at? What are your top 10 lessons learned? So just have a conversation.
Oh, that's it. Yeah. So what were your experiences?
Sarah?
I took a few service learning courses when I was in college, and I think that's like a big reason why I stayed with Maine. I remember we got interviewed about it too, and I think getting out in communities and getting to know different types of people, to me a lot of those people want to stay and like, work on problems. So I think it can be really valuable. I know that sounds like a very overarching comment, but I think they were great. And they did develop more hope.
I did, well, it wasn't with the class, it was an independent study, but I was working on the border with Arizona and Mexico. And for me, it was, as a student, it was great because it got me out of the classroom, it got me out of the university, and I was engaging with real issues. And so for me, it was probably one of the best experiences of my undergraduate career because everything made sense. It was really taking this, taking what we learned from the classroom and it was on the ground, and it was impacting people's lives. So it was really important for me in my experience to see those real benefits.
Let's go Amanda and then Linda.
I had just kind of a more general question about implementing service learning. And I've served as a visitor volunteer for Vermont Campus Compact, and I was wondering if Maine Campus Compact is utilizing AmeriCorps programs and funding as well.
Yes. I don't know specifically, but they have a STEM, one specifically for STEM that they're very excited about. And we also have AmeriCorps and Vistas on campus.
I know that Campus Compact right now is working on a big proposal that involves AmeriCorps and would actually end up funding sort of several AmeriCorps volunteers to actually like become campus residents for a significant period of time. And that's not funded yet, but hopefully it will be.
So I love teaching courses that have service learning and community engagement. One of my courses was a graduate course in GIS and Geographic Information Systems, where each of the graduate students worked with a community partner to do mapping of their information. And one of the students worked with the local housing authority to map the information. I got a call from the partner that the student had blown up the computer and they lost all their data. And it was real, it really did happen. And so I think one of the things, that sounds like a problem, but it was also an interesting opportunity to think about partnership, and sort of what to do and how to do it. And we spent the summer sort of reconstructing their data and doing some additional maps that they didn't expect. But it's the easy part of teaching is to never go out of the classroom. I think the interesting, more challenging thing is the wonderful work that you're doing to say, okay, we need to do something different. And to know that sometimes the computers blow up.
UMaine have like a symposium of projects like these to show, like, open to the community? Because my undergraduate, we ended up having a symposium, and anybody could come, and a lot of people from the community came, and people that we had worked with as community members, just to come see what our final product was, and just kind of facilitate a discussion in a wider or bigger context.
We don't specifically have, but I know nursing has community projects, and they have an event with posters. We have the academic showcase that sometimes has, with the Center for Undergraduate Research, we'll have posters that will be community engagement, but they don't have, we're working on a section for community engagement within that. That would be somewhat, but I would love a big symposium more similar to this, where people talk about what they're doing. It would be great.
It'd be great for the campus. I know that the CES project is having a big to-do at the end. They're having two, actually. One is going to be with the participants and the community partners, and then after that there's going to be a best practices showcase. So that could end up being, I would imagine, a very similar event.
I think it's a great suggestion, though, and I think one of our goals is to kind of build capacity. Just as kind of starting out, but to build capacity in the long term. So maybe that's something that would happen in the future. And I'd actually love to see. I think so many people. I mean, we're all fairly new to UMaine. Well, the four that are teaching, and we come and we don't know the community well yet, and we're willing and interested in doing these types of engaged projects, but I have no idea what the community needs are, right? And so I would love to see something where we invite all sorts of community partners in that could give a 5-minute presentation of here's what we need. We need help with research. We need help with student volunteers, so that instructors could come with an idea of courses. Is there something like this, Linda?
No, I was just going to make a suggestion because it's such a great idea.
Go ahead.
One of the things at UMass Lowell that we did for new faculty when they started is we hired a bus for an afternoon where the faculty would get on the bus, and the bus would go around to different partners, get off and go and see their space, and then the partner would get on the bus, and then we'd all had dinner together. And it was a way for people to really get a feeling for the locale, for place-based kinds of things. And only new faculty were allowed to be a part of it, so it really, it said this is a special kind of opportunity.
My partner is, I don't know if people are aware of this, in Maine they have a Leadership Maine program. I don't know if anybody's familiar, but my partner is doing it and took a 2-day road trip all around the state to talk about issues, and he is so engaged in Maine issues now. I mean, it's amazing what it did to him. He's, yeah.
You've got to tap him for some info.
Yeah, seriously.
So I was going to say, I kind of have a question, but I have to tell a story to ask it. So in this room, in the fall of 2007, we practiced this kind of thing. I don't even know that we called it service learning, but it, and we brought up, there were 8 faculty that taught a single service learning course all in their spare time. It wasn't, it was overload or something. Nobody got anything for it, but and we had sort of had a sense of an important issue that would allow us to practice sustainability stuff. It had to do with how people do development along waterfronts in Maine, along rivers or lakes or the coast, and sort of the economic and sociocultural and environmental dimensions of that. So that's what we called it, and we invited, there were about 20 students, more graduate students than undergraduates, but we invited in all these different stakeholders and sort of said, what would you have us work on? And then over time, the students, 4 different projects with about 5 students a project that were where we went out of our way to have the mix of student expertise match that kind of problem. And we actually worked with 4 towns, Veazey, Warrington, Camden, and Orrington. Did I do that right? Or anyway, I think I missed one, but trust me, there were 4. But there were 2 things about it that I still remember quite clearly. One is we were all exhausted at the end of it, and kind of like, as opposed to one of these interdisciplinary things where someone comes in one time, talks, and then goes away, we were all 8 faculty, and this included the former chancellor, Joe Westfall, who was a political scientist. So we had lots of different expertise. We all came every time. We did all this stuff. We listened to the stakeholders. We worked with the students. So we were exhausted. So we almost had a hard time maintaining it, if you will. And second, I don't think any of us could have done that project by ourselves. And that's what my question is it seems like these sustainability problems are very multifaceted. And I know when I try to think about them with my background, I usually just want to go talk to somebody like you guys to figure out the parts of it that I don't know anything about. How does that work for you? And how do we, I mean, these can be sort of labor-intensive efforts, right? You've got a special grant. I don't know if that helps much or it actually makes things more difficult. I've been in both situations, but what do you think?
I think the purpose of the CS grant is to promote interdisciplinary collaboration between the groups that are actually doing this project. And I think so that's largely how we structured our initial plan. Our initial plan was, we were going to have all of these multi-group get-togethers, and the students were going to be mentoring each other at different levels, and it was a grand plan, and it would have been great. And I think we can work towards that in the future, but what ended up happening is definitely a scaled-back version of what we had originally planned. But there's still, we still have meetings all together, and we talk about what we're doing, our barriers, our issues, and I think we help one another.
We've done also some things as a group, like when we were doing the survey, using each other's strengths and strategies and the blog. So overall, we're trying to interact as much as we can, considering our time limitations and that we teach very different courses.
I think ideally it would be very interesting in the future. I mean, we talked about this, that if we had a thematic focus beyond a little bit more specific, if it were waterfront development or dams, or but a lot of our courses were already on the books.
Yeah.
So if maybe we decided to do this again 2 years down the road, then we could maybe have more time to modify to figure out how to make the puzzle pieces fit better. But
The exhaustion piece is very interesting. It's like, how do you avoid? So that was you just did that one time, and then that was it.
Yeah, we did well, and it helped us get a $20 million grant, which was wonderful. But even the grant was actually much more about research. So we formed the teams, and out of that course came one of our projects. But it didn't actually fund, that grant wasn't about doing courses. And so even so it was successful in one way, and yet it's almost interesting to me that, 8 years later, where you guys are doing another really interesting version of how do we make this work. So I'm sort of trying to reflect on all of that and think of, I think sustained capacity seems like a really big challenge for all the things we're trying to do. And in some ways, this work is more labor intensive, right? Really valuable. You hear students, and I had this experience in high school of a wonderful service learning experience, but
what I like about this model is we're not changing the university system.
Yeah.
Because everyone's doing their thing in their classes the way they would do it anyway.
yeah,
With just maybe a little bit more integration. We're trying not to add too much to that.
which is good, because we went the wrong way on that.
Yeah, I think we want a sustainable model so that we can try and do it every semester. So I think keeping the extra, extra asks to the faculty members has to be kept to a minimum. Otherwise, what will happen. You've experienced it.
I feel like our collaboration has really held me accountable to things that I wanted to do anyway. But that,
Spend it up a little bit.
yeah, right. And, being a new faculty member in the first semester might have set some of those things aside, like doing the research on my class, but now I feel like that the survey that we've put out and our other research components are really enhanced by the collective questions that we're asking, that we were, working through that whole process together, and then we'll be able to refine it over time too.
And
so that's incredibly
another,
helpful.
The important part of that too is so not only keeping the workload down, what you would do differently down, but also fulfilling the research obligations.
Right.
So if we can get a publication for everybody out of it, that's just going to help them. So there's extra motivation for doing it. possibly. So building that up and kind of keeping some of the stress down.
Yes, and kudos to the team at Bridie for taking the lead on getting IRB approval for everything. It wasn't easy, but she did.
Well, even just doing research with students, whole new world. I had no idea how we would do that. Have you all done research? You've done research with students, yeah.
Brady
That was
won't even
totally
come
new
over to
for
your
me.
house without IRB.
So, I'm Paula Page. Why should a state university that's supposedly a research, why should the state, what does the state get out of this? Why should this be done?
We're helping to solve some problems. Like in my case with a planning, the state won't have enough resources to do planning in all communities. So if we can have students helping out in solving some problems while they're learning, and in the end we're publishing, well, we should all be happy.
So part of my reason for asking that is, wouldn't it be great to have you down at the State House doing the same thing so that they could see the interesting future that you represent?
I was just gonna say, I'm in Sharon's class for Eco 370, and we actually had the director of the energy office come and talk to us for a while. He seemed very excited about our project, building window inserts, so I thought that was very interesting. He was very supportive of that, and we bounced ideas off of that. The class has been going well. I'm actually in that picture. It's kind of fun. Orange t-shirt.
Yes.
So.
It's a good look for you.
Well, thank you for sharing.
Do you want to say anything more about what you're doing in that class? Because we didn't get the chance to. The window inserts is just a great project.
Yeah, it's so Sharon kind of set up the project and try to get people from the community to buy these window inserts. They're targeted for low income, but anyone can buy them to help save on heating costs. So we've gone out and measured windows, and now we're trying to get them involved with the volunteering of building the windows, that they'll actually come and build them for more of a community aspect to get them engaged. So a lot of the class is a lot of planning, which is pretty much a lot of it planning and getting coordinated. It hasn't felt like a class because like in other classes, we're more learning, but this class we're actually learning and going out and doing it. That's how it feels most of the time. We're actually just doing it again at the same time.
Thank you. Cindy, could you talk a little more about the blog?
Oh yeah. I know we're out of time, but I'll just say one of the kind of coordinating activities that allows students to feel like they're part of a larger effort, to feel a sense of community on campus around service learning, but also for our research purposes is a blog. So we decided to, well, I don't know that we ever got a consensus, but we decided to call it Pay It Forward, and it's a service learning blog where students can get on and write or reflect upon their experiences in their service learning project. So maybe you'll do that at some point toward the end of the semester. But I'm hopeful that at some point it will kind of help us to build capacity, but also be a means for us to understand what are the benefits and how do students experience this. Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming.